guys rolled out, about a month ago or so?
So yeah, it was around September 8th, I think, was when Google released it, and of course across all the wires, headlines were search engine optimization is dead, and it was somewhat interesting because I think it alerted a lot of us that do SEO to wait. Is it even possible that Google could release something to pretty much put an industry to bed? So I think a lot of us at first were somewhat startled by it, and then as time has gone on now, we're about a month into it, not a whole ton has changed from an SEO perspective. And SEOs are still in business and are alive and kicking and quite well positioned for the future. So, but that's my presentation in a little while.
So because there aren't any really significant changes that you've seen thus far, then what are you planning on covering in there, just that people don't need to freak out?
It's wonderful. So no, I mean, there's big changes, but Google makes big changes all the time, right? So I think one thing that Google Instant really kind of brings to the forefront of the SEO conversation is really just how commercially biased Google appears to be. So with Google Instant, really, Google Instant is sort of an evolution of Google Suggest and Google Autocomplete. So about 2 years ago, Google started predicting what it is that we were attempting to type. But with Google Instant, since search results are actually organic search results and paid search results are being updated in real time, when you start typing in a letter and the suggest terms come up, it's somewhat ironic and somewhat concerning, but maybe it's just the way people type. But when you type in the letter A, for instance, not surprisingly, Apple and other branded A terms come up first. I mean, but wouldn't logic suggest that a sort of a more broad, less commercially biased term would be more popular than, say, the branded term? So I'm just going to throw out there in my presentation the fact that it does appear that Google Suggest and Google Instant, as being sort of an evolution of Google Search, appears to really kind of be suggesting to users as they type commercially driven terms, which, if you think of what keeps Google in business, it's Google AdWords, which represents over 95% of their revenue, and so I'm just saying it's becoming more evident. So maybe we are just a commercially biased world, right? So when we search, we're thinking about brands before we are sort of broader head terms, but I don't know. So I'm going to be talking about that, the commercial bias. Also going to be talking more specifically about Google Suggest, and from an SEO perspective, how we need to start looking at Google Suggest and asking not necessarily where do we fall in the search results, but where do you fall within Google Suggest? Are you ranked for the keywords that Google is suggesting to users when they start typing in a search query? And then also looking at, from an analytical perspective, what are some of the changes that people are experiencing both through Google AdWords as well as organic search as a result of Google Instant? And the truth on the organic side, the SEO side, is not a whole heck of a lot has changed. The fundamental Google algorithm has stayed the same. But on the paid search side, Marin Software, for instance, who's here exhibiting at PubCon and speaking at PubCon, put out a study just about a week ago suggesting that impressions are increasing, reported impressions are increasing, which we would suspect. Clicks are increasing. Conversion, the amount of conversions are increasing, but the actual conversion rate is going down a little bit. And overall, they've concluded that Google Instant is a win-win-win. A win for users because it's a cool way to search. It saves time. Obviously, that's what Google Instant really is all about, is saving a significant amount of time for the user. It's a win for advertisers because they're getting more clicks, they're getting more conversions. Even if they're paying a little bit more for those conversions, they're getting more of them. And it's clearly a win for Google. Google's making more money, and win-win-win. So,
what do you think that we're going to be seeing in the next year to come? Where do you think this is?
Yeah, I think so. Google has been doing that, right? And again, it could be, Google Suggest supposedly is based on Google's aggregate data of us, the searcher, So let's just assume that Google isn't doing anything to slant those towards a commercial bias. Regardless, the commercial bias exists, so I think there will be more sort of realization and acceptance of that, and then we'll be asking ourselves questions over the next year of, does this mean that the big branded retailers and the big brands are going to be the ones who put the smaller guy out of business? And that would be unfortunate if that's sort of the logical end result of this commercial bias. And then I think the other thing that we'll, as an industry, be talking about is the impact of the local element of the Google search algorithm, and how, based on that sort of GPS, if you will, understanding of where the search user is originating a search from, that's a game changer. So I also think Google Suggest, there really hasn't been a ton of, unless maybe I haven't been invited into the conversations, but there haven't been a ton of conversations going on about Google Suggest. It just appeared one day, I think in like November of 2008 or something like that, and we were just like, oh, okay, it's Google suggesting, but I think there was an assumption that people were still typing in the keyword that they intended to and weren't being persuaded by the suggest or the predictive search element, which that's sort of what I call it. But I think those are the two game changers, potentially, as it relates to the Google organic search algorithm, Google Suggest and Google Places. So, but I think the industry, this SEO industry, will continue to thrive. I think PubCon as a conference will continue to sort of lead the way, for many years to come on conversations regarding, well, yes, when Google makes their changes, we'll all be IMing one another and texting one another and saying, oh my God, what does this mean? But the reality is that, the search industry is evolving, as our friends in Mountain View, California, at Google headquarters, as they're evolving. So we're ready for them, and we'll continue to, evolve as they evolve. So.
All right, so you've heard it here. Kris Jones of KBJ Interactive says SEO is not dead. We're still thriving. All right, Kris, thank you so much for your time.